No accusations. No outside voices. Just one man's own words. In a phone call recorded by a sailing friend and later obtained by CNN, a man identified as Brian Hooker described everything that went wrong. The oar pin that broke. The anchor he threw out. The flares he fired. The boats that passed without stopping. The darkness that came down fast. He called it, in his own words, a cascade of failures. Every single detail in that description came from Brian Hooker himself. No investigator handed it to us. No family member reconstructed it. Brian Hooker sat on a phone call, not knowing it was being recorded, and laid out the events of that night in his own voice, in his own sequence, in his own words. That matters. Because when you take those words and hold them against the geography of Elbow Cay, against the physics of wind and water, and against what investigators later found on the boat he says nobody reached, something in that account stops adding up. Not in a dramatic way. Not all at once. Detail by detail. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. We have people following this case from all over the country and we want to know where you are joining us from today. Brian told Stevenson he lost the oar. He anchored the dinghy. He yelled into the dark. He used his phone flashlight and fired flares to flag down passing boats. He said no one stopped. He drifted for hours. He ended up 4 miles away in Marsh Harbor, made it through the brush to the boatyard, and called for help around 4:30 in the morning. He also said this: it was a cascade of failures and it's something I'm never going to forgive myself for. Those are his words. Not a prosecutor's. Not Lynette's daughter's. His. The question this video is going to work through is a simple one. When you examine each of those details one by one, using confirmed reporting, local knowledge, and verified geography, does the full picture hold together? Because Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. He maintains he is innocent. His attorneys have said publicly there is no evidence to support any allegations against him. All of that is true and it stays true throughout everything you are about to hear. But the details of that night, the ones Brian himself described, raise questions his account has not yet answered. We are going to go through them. One at a time. Starting with who Lynette Hooker actually was. Before the investigation. Before the questions. Before any of the details we are going to work through together, there is a person. Her name is Lynette Hooker. She was 55 years old. She was a mother. She was a sailor. And she had spent more than a decade building a life on the water alongside her husband of 25 years. That is not background. That matters to everything that comes next. Lynette and Brian Hooker sold their home in Onstead, Michigan, a small town about 35 miles southwest of Ann Arbor. They moved onto a sailboat full-time. They named it the Soulmate. They flew a Detroit Lions flag from the stern. And they documented every mile of it on social media under the name The Sailing Hookers on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, describing themselves as a married couple who had, in their own words, sailed away from BS. Their route took them through New Orleans, Miami Beach, Key West, Lake Michigan, and eventually into the Bahamas, where they had been since at least February of 2026. Confirmed by NBC News and multiple outlets that track their social media posts. Lynette posted her last TikTok 2 days before she disappeared. That detail is confirmed by NBC News and Click on Detroit. 2 days. Whatever she was looking at through that camera, whatever she was thinking, none of it gave any sign that April 4th would be the last day anyone outside the dinghy would see her. Her daughter, Carly Aylesworth, described Lynette to CBS News as an experienced swimmer who had been sailing for more than 10 years. To NBC News, Carly said her mother was fit, capable, and unlikely to simply fall overboard. Lynette's mother, Darlene Hamlet, told the Associated Press directly, "Our family grew up on water." Lynette had been near lakes and on boats her whole life, Hamlet said. This was not a first-time passenger on a boat in unfamiliar water. This was a woman who had lived aboard a sailboat for years. Who had navigated open ocean. Who had handled rough weather on the water more times than most people ever will. Brian himself said on the recorded call that while she was not an athlete, she was a regular swimmer who was determined. That is his description of her. Not Carly's. Not Darlene's. His. On March 29, just 6 days before she vanished, Lynette posted a video from Marsh Harbor. Darkened skies. Choppy water. She captioned it, "Here we are at Marsh Harbor. The Sea of Abaco is very entertaining." She was not afraid of rough water. She knew what it looked like. She had posted it from the middle of it. That is who was in that dinghy on the night of April 4th. An experienced woman. On a familiar body of water. In a boat she had ridden many times before. That matters to everything that comes next. Here is what Brian Hooker says happened. Not what investigators say. Not what Carly says. Not what anyone outside that dinghy claims. This is Brian Hooker's account drawn from his recorded phone call obtained by CBS News and CNN, from his Facebook statement, from the maps he made himself and shared with friends, and from what the Royal Bahamas Police Force confirmed he told them directly. We are going to lay it out completely. Every detail. In sequence. Because you cannot examine something you have not fully understood first. April 4, 2026. A Saturday. Brian and Lynette had spent part of that day at Tahiti Beach, a popular spot on the southern tip of Elbow Cay. A barge pulls up there at low tide and serves drinks. Brian described it himself on the call to Blaine Stevenson. From there, they took their 8-foot hard-bottomed dinghy to the Abaco in near Hopetown for dinner. A bartender named Ken, speaking to the New York Post, confirmed the couple was there that evening, enjoying rum and cokes by the hotel pool. They left the Abaco Inn to head back to the Soulmate. The Soulmate was anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay on Elbow Cay. That is confirmed by Brian's own account to the Stevensons and by CBS News, which obtained maps Brian himself made and shared with friends. The time was around 7:30 in the evening. That is confirmed by the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Brian says conditions changed fast. Winds picked up to around 20 knots. The seas got choppy. On the recorded call, he described what happened next. She bounced off the dinghy. His words. Not a reconstruction. Not an interpretation. He said she basically just bounced off the dinghy in the middle of a blow of around 20-knot winds that came up. When she went over, the engine's safety lanyard went with her. The lanyard is the cord that connects the ignition key to the boat's operator. It is designed to cut the engine automatically if the person running the boat goes overboard. Brian told authorities she had the key. When she went in, the engine shut off. That is confirmed by the Royal Bahamas Police Force. He said the sun set approximately 10 minutes after she went over. Darkness came down fast. Neither of them was wearing a life jacket. That is confirmed by Richard Cook, fire team lead with Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue. Brian says he yelled. He threw a flotation cushion toward her. He lost an oar. He anchored the dinghy. He yelled some more. He fired flares and used his phone flashlight to try to flag down boats that were passing. He said none of them stopped. He said by the time he got the anchor set, he was already a quarter to half a mile away from where she went in. He called it a cascade of failures. The dinghy drifted. Without engine power, it moved with the wind and the current. It traveled 4 miles from the point where he says the incident happened, ending up near Marsh Harbor, confirmed by CBS News, which reviewed maps Brian himself shared. That journey took approximately 8 hours. He washed ashore. He made his way through brush to the Marsh Harbor boatyard. A security guard named Edward Smith, speaking to Fox News Digital, said a man arrived that morning appearing exhausted and thirsty, asking for water and saying a woman was still in the water. Police were called. Authorities were notified around 4 to 4:30 in the morning on April 5. That is the account. Every detail in it came from Brian Hooker, his call, his maps, his statement, his own words given to investigators and to friends. Now we test it. Now we take Brian's account, every detail he gave, and we hold it against something he cannot control. The geography. The physics. And the words of people who know that water better than most people alive. We are not adding anything. We are not inventing anything. We are simply placing what Brian said next to what is actually there. And we are going to let you see what lines up and what does not. Start with the water itself. The Sea of Abaco near Elbow Cay is not deep, open ocean. Mo Monesteem has spent 15 years chartering boats in the Great Abaco Island area. Fox News Digital spoke to him directly. He described the water surrounding those cays in terms that are hard to set aside. He said you can see the bottom. He said drownings happen occasionally near Elbow Cay, but that bodies are recovered quickly. He said, if you do fall overboard and drown, somebody will see you the next day. I'll be driving the boat, I will see stingrays, I will see turtles, I would see a human body. At high tide, Monesteem told Fox News Digital, the water in that channel rises to about 10 feet. Sometimes it is as shallow as 4 feet. This is not the open Atlantic. This is a busy, well-traveled, clear water channel where people motor, anchor, and pass through regularly. Lynette Hooker has not been found in that kind of water. After all this time. Monesteem himself called it the mystery. Not being found, he said. That's the mystery. Now the lanyard. This is where Brian's own account runs into a problem, not from investigators, not from Carly, but from basic boating design. A safety lanyard on a motorized dinghy is not a passenger accessory. It is an operator's safety device. Mercury Marine, one of the largest marine engine manufacturers in the world, describes it plainly. The lanyard physically connects the operator to a stop switch on the dashboard adjacent to the operator's position. The U.S. Coast Guard uses the same language. The device is designed to shut off the engine if the operator, the person driving the boat, is thrown overboard. Federal law, which took effect April 1, 2021, requires the operator of any motorized recreational vessel under 26 feet to attach the lanyard to their person while underway. Brian Hooker was the operator. He drove the dinghy. Carly Aylesworth told CBS News exactly what she told them, word for word. For one, I don't understand how she got the key. Brian's always driving. So he basically is in charge of the key. So the fact that my mom had it doesn't make any sense. Brian's account says Lynette went over with the lanyard. His friend Daniel Danforth, speaking to CBS News, acknowledged the key question too. Danforth said photos and videos the hookers took while on the dinghy never show either of them with the key attached. He suggested it was possible Lynette reached for something as she fell overboard and grabbed the lanyard. That is Danforth's explanation, not Brian's. Brian has not offered a specific explanation for why Lynette had the operator's lanyard. The question sits there unanswered. Now the anchor. Brian said on his recorded call, his own words, that he threw the anchor out and anchored the dinghy. He yelled. He could not see Lynette anymore. By the time he got the anchor set, he said, he was already a quarter to half a mile away from where she went in. A quarter to half a mile. In that direction. Away from her. Carly asked the question to CNN directly. Why wouldn't he drop anchor and look for her? Why did he paddle the other way? He did anchor. He said so himself. But by his own account, by the time it caught, he was already hundreds of yards from where she went in, and the dinghy then drifted 4 miles further in the opposite direction from the Soulmate. Now the drift. The dinghy traveled 4 miles from the point of the incident to Marsh Harbor. That is confirmed by CBS News, which reviewed maps Brian made himself. That journey took approximately 8 hours, ending around 4 a.m. Ken, the bartender at the Abaco and who spoke to the New York Post, has spent years on that water. He did not mince words about the timeline. He said it is only 4 miles to Marsh Harbor from where they departed. He said, it shouldn't have taken 8 to 10 hours to get there. Even if he was only floating, it should have been a much quicker time. 8 hours to travel 4 miles in the same direction the wind was pushing. The Soulmate was anchored in the other direction. The same wind that Brian says took Lynette was pushing the dinghy away from the Soulmate, toward Marsh Harbor. That part of the account is consistent with itself. Wind blows in one direction. But here is what that means. If the wind was strong enough to push a dinghy 4 miles toward Marsh Harbor over 8 hours, it was blowing hard away from the Soulmate the entire time. Reaching the Soulmate that night, from that position, against that wind, in a powerless dinghy, would have required paddling directly into the conditions Brian describes as a cascade of failures. None of this is accusation. Every number here came from Brian Hooker or from reporters who went to that water and measured it themselves. Every observation came from someone with years of experience on that exact stretch of sea. These are Brian Hooker's own details. Measured against what is actually there. The math raises questions his account has not answered. So far, everything we have looked at has come from Brian's own account, his words, his timeline, his maps. Now we look at something else. Documents. Records. And Lynette's own words, written in private, to a friend, long before April 4th. As you go through this, think about what detail is standing out to you the most. What part of this story feels like it needs a closer look? Let us know in the comments, we read every single one. None of what follows is rumor. None of it came from anonymous sources. Every item in this chapter is drawn from police records, court documents, and messages confirmed by CBS News. We are going to present each one precisely. We are not going to draw conclusions. We are going to show you what is documented, name the source, and let you decide what it means. Start with 2005. The couple had been living in Kentwood, Michigan. WZZM 13, the local ABC affiliate, filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the Kentwood Police Department and obtained nearly 40 pages of police documents going back to that year. Those documents describe an incident involving a child in the home. According to police reports, child witnesses told investigators that Brian Hooker became upset during an argument, chased a child upstairs, pinned the child against a door, and placed both hands around the child's neck. One witness said the child was lifted partly off the ground. A forensic report noted that a responding officer observed light red marks on the child's neck that were consistent with the allegations, confirmed by reporting from NBC News. A report of actual or suspected child abuse was filed. Brian Hooker was identified as the alleged perpetrator. The case went to trial. A Kent County jury acquitted him in 2006. That is confirmed by court records, verified independently by WTOL 11 Investigates and NBC News. An acquittal means the jury determined the evidence did not meet the legal standard required for conviction. That is what the record shows, nothing more and nothing less. Now 2015. A domestic assault call came in at 1:05 in the morning. Kentwood, Michigan. Officers were dispatched to the home for an intoxicated female who had reportedly been assaulted. What officers found, according to the Kentwood Police Department report confirmed by NBC News, was this: Brian had a bloody nose. It was swollen and red. He told officers Lynette had struck him in the face multiple times. He said he had never been hit like that in a long time. He became emotional. Lynette told a different story. She told officers that Brian had struck her in the forehead. She also alleged that he choked her and punched her once. Officers noted she had no visible injuries at the time. Both gave conflicting accounts of the same night. Lynette was the one arrested. She spent a night in county jail on charges of assault and battery. The warrant was later denied. The prosecutor determined there was, and this is the official language, insufficient evidence as to who started the assault. The case was dismissed. Brian was never charged in that incident. Carly Aylesworth told Fox News what she says she witnessed across the years of their marriage. There's history of him choking her out and threatening to throw her overboard. Brian's attorney has denied those allegations on his behalf. Now, January 2024. CBS News obtained private messages Lynette sent to her friend Marnie Stevenson, the same Marnie Stevenson whose husband Blaine recorded the phone call Brian did not know was being taped. These messages came from a period when the couple had temporarily separated. In late January 2024, Lynette wrote to Marnie, "I guess it was too much closeness. We decided to call it quits. I'm not going back." In another message from the same period, she wrote, "It was real bad. I can't be out there with him." She had quit her career. She had sold her house. She had given away everything she owned to go sailing. And in January 2024, she was telling her closest friend on the water that she was done. By late February 2024, the messages show the couple had reconciled. Marnie wrote to her, "Looks like things are on the up and up." Lynette replied with heart emojis and a thumbs up. She went back. Court records are not verdicts. An acquittal is an acquittal. A dismissed warrant is a dismissed warrant. But the pattern those records describe, and the words Lynette herself wrote to a friend who had no reason to lie, are now part of what two separate investigations are working through. That is what the documents say. Everything we have looked at so far lies in documents. Police reports. Court records. Private messages. Maps Brian made himself. Now we move to something different. What people say they saw with their own eyes on the night of April 4th. And this is where we have to be precise about sourcing in a way that matters to how you weigh what comes next. Start with what is not in dispute. Brian Hooker, on his recorded phone call obtained by CNN, described firing flares and using his phone flashlight to try to get the attention of passing boats. He says he was in the dinghy. Drifting. In open water. He says the boats did not stop. That is his version. He placed himself in the dinghy when the flares went up. Not on the Soulmate. In the water. That detail is confirmed across CNN, CBS News, and NBC News. Now here is where we have to stop and be transparent with you. What we are about to describe comes from one source. Ashley Banfield, a journalist and former CNN anchor, has been covering this case intensively on her podcast, Drop Dead Serious. She has been on the ground in the Bahamas. She has spoken to witnesses, reviewed footage, and reported details that have not appeared in wire service coverage from CNN, NBC, CBS, or ABC. We do not dismiss that reporting. Banfield is a credentialed journalist with 36 years of experience. But we have a standard on this channel. If a wire service has not independently confirmed a claim, you hear it with that context clearly stated. With that said, here is what Banfield has reported. According to Banfield's coverage on Drop Dead Serious, multiple witnesses reportedly saw flares coming from the Soulmate itself, the anchored yacht in Aunt Pat's Bay, before 9 p.m. on the night of April 4th. Read that slowly. Brian says he left the Abaco in around 7:30 p.m. The Soulmate was anchored some distance away in the opposite direction from where the dinghy eventually drifted. Brian says he and Lynette never reached the Soulmate that night. If what those witnesses described to Banfield is accurate, flares coming from the anchored yacht before 9 p.m. Then someone was on that boat within roughly 90 minutes of their departure. Brian says no one reached it. Banfield has also reported the existence of surveillance footage from Lubbers Quarters, a location across the Sea of Abaco with a sightline toward Elbow Cay and the area where the Soulmate was anchored. According to her reporting, that footage captures a small dark object visible near the boats during the relevant timeframe, raising questions about the dinghy's route and what the timeline can and cannot account for. These accounts, the witness reports of flares from the Soulmate, and the Lubbers Quarters footage are sourced exclusively to Banfield's reporting as of this script. They have not been independently confirmed by wire services. We are flagging that clearly because that distinction matters on this channel. What has been confirmed by CBS News is this: investigators executed a search warrant on the Soulmate. They seized a digital video recorder, digital tablets, and cell phone-related equipment. The warrant language described those items as potentially containing material evidence related to a missing person and to causing bodily harm. That warrant was executed on the boat Brian says was never reached. If the witnesses Banfield spoke to are right, someone was on that boat before 9 p.m. Brian says no one reached it that night. Those two things cannot both be true. We have spent 6 chapters inside Brian Hooker's account. We have measured it against the geography, against the physics, against the documents, against what witnesses say they saw. Now we turn to the boat itself. Because while Brian was in custody being questioned, investigators were not standing still. They went to the Soulmate. And what they did there and what they found there is where this investigation now lives. Start with the warrant. CBS News reviewed the actual text of the search warrant executed on the Soulmate. What they confirmed is precise and worth reading carefully. Investigators seized 3 categories of items from that vessel. a digital video recorder, digital tablets, and cell phone related equipment and accessories. The warrant described those items as potentially being, and these are the exact words confirmed by CBS News, material evidence and/or contains material evidence related to a missing person causing bodily harm. Every word in a search warrant is deliberate. Warrants are legal documents reviewed by a magistrate before they are approved. A magistrate had to be persuaded that probable cause existed, that there was a reasonable basis to believe those devices contained evidence of a crime before a single item could be removed from that boat. The phrase that demands attention is causing bodily harm. Not missing person. Not boating accident. Not uncertain circumstances. Causing bodily harm. That is the legal framework investigators chose to write into that warrant. And a magistrate agreed it was appropriate. Now the DVR. A digital video recorder on a liveaboard sailboat like the Soulmate is typically connected to security cameras. Many blue water sailing vessels carry cameras, inside and out, for navigation, safety, and security. A DVR does not need someone to press record. It records automatically. By schedule. By motion trigger. Continuously. And it logs every recording session by timestamp. If anyone boarded that boat on the night of April 4th, during the hours Brian says the Soulmate sat empty and unreached, and if cameras were operating, that footage exists on that recorder. Here is what matters about deletion. When a file is deleted on a digital device, the data is not immediately destroyed. The space is marked as available. But the actual recording often remains until new data overwrites it. Forensic tools used by law enforcement can recover files that a user believed were gone. They can pull timestamps. They can reconstruct what was recorded and when. Investigators have the DVR. They are working through it now. Now the tablets and Starlink. The Soulmate was equipped with Starlink satellite internet, a system that functions in open water, at night, without needing to be near a cell tower. Brian and Lynette had been living aboard that boat. Their devices had built up an extensive connection history with that system. Every time a device connects to a network, a log is created. On the device itself. On the router. And on the provider's servers. Those records show which device connected, when it connected, and from what location. Because the Soulmate was a live-aboard home, that connection history is dense and detailed. Investigators know what normal activity on that network looks like. They know which devices connected on which days and at which times. Any connection that occurred during the hours Brian says no one was aboard, any device that woke, pinged, or accessed that network while the boat was supposedly empty will not blend into the background. It will stand out precisely because the baseline is so well established. The tablets are now in investigators' hands. So is everything those tablets connected to. Now the watch. This is where we apply the same sourcing standard we used in the previous chapter. What follows comes from Ashley Banfield's reporting on Drop Dead Serious. It has not been independently confirmed by wire services as of this script. We are stating that clearly. And we are including it because Banfield is a credentialed journalist whose reporting in this case has been specific and detailed, and because the question it raises is one investigators are actively working through. According to Banfield's reporting, Lynette Hooker was photographed wearing her Apple Watch on April 4th, the last day anyone outside that dinghy saw her. And according to Banfield, when investigators boarded the Soulmate and executed the search warrant, a watch was recovered from that vessel. Brian Hooker says Lynette never reached the Soulmate. Lynette was photographed wearing her Apple Watch on the last day she was seen. A watch was found on a boat she was never supposed to have reached. Those three things exist at the same time. Right now. There are only three ways to explain it. The watch was already on the boat before April 4th, a spare, a second watch, something left there earlier. Or Lynette herself reached the Soulmate that night, which contradicts everything Brian has said. Or someone placed it there after the fact. There is no fourth option. An Apple Watch is not just a watch. It is a data device. It logs heart rate continuously. It records movement. It tracks when it was last worn and when it last synced to a paired iPhone. Investigators who have the watch, and who have the cell phone-related equipment seized from the Soulmate, are in a position to know exactly what that watch recorded and when it stopped recording. The watch either aligns with Brian's account or it does not. Investigators have it. They have the answer. The public is still waiting. Brian Hooker left the Bahamas on April 15th. He boarded a plane. He is back in Michigan. His attorney confirmed the departure to NBC News, citing a family emergency involving his mother's illness. The Royal Bahamas Police Force was informed before he left. He departed within his legal rights. He has not been charged with any crime. But here is what his departure does not change. When Commissioner Shanta Knowles of the Royal Bahamas Police Force spoke to NBC News after Brian's release, she said something specific. She said Brian Hooker remains a suspect in the investigation. And she said the investigation is ongoing. Release without charges is not exoneration. It is a decision made within a legal time window. Under Bahamian law, investigators had until a set deadline to charge or release him. They released him. The Department of Public Prosecutions recommended no charges be filed and added 3 words that define where this case now stands. At this time. Not ever. At this time. Pending the outcome of further investigations. The investigation did not close when Brian walked out of that police station. It continued. It is continuing now. And it is not the only investigation running. The U.S. Coast Guard confirmed to NBC News, to CBS News, to Fox News Digital, and to News Nation that it has opened a criminal investigation into Lynette Hooker's disappearance. That confirmation has been consistent across every major outlet that asked. The Coast Guard Investigative Service, CAIS, is a federal law enforcement agency. Its authority comes from federal statute. CAIS agents are sworn law enforcement officers. They carry weapons. They execute warrants. They make arrests. And critically, they have the legal authority to obtain records from US-based companies through proper legal process. That means Google, Apple, SpaceX, which operates Starlink. Any US-based carrier whose network connected to a device in this case. Each of those companies, served with a valid legal request, is required by law to produce records. Account-level data. Search history. Location information stored on company servers. Connection logs. Brian is back in the United States. Those companies are in the United States. CAIS has the authority to reach both. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer explained the stakes plainly to Newsweek. She said that without Lynette's body being recovered, the case is not automatically closed. Her words, "Without her body, I still think based on the totality, there's a possibility that they could charge." She also said investigators would make obtaining digital records a high priority. And she identified what she believed would matter most: if he made any Google searches, that will be where the case is made. If charges were eventually to come from the Bahamas, extradition is legally possible. The United States and the Bahamas signed a formal extradition treaty on March 9, 1990. It was ratified by the U.S. Senate. It is in force. But extradition is a process measured in months, not days. It involves diplomatic requests, judicial review, and approval through channels that move slowly by design. Brian is back in Michigan. The evidence is not. And the agency that can reach it does not need him present to build what it is building. We started this video with one fixed point. Brian Hooker says the soulmate was never reached on the night of April 4th. He says Lynette went overboard before they got there. He says the boat sat empty, untouched, unboarded through that entire night. That is the claim. It has not changed across a single interview, a single statement, or 5 days of questioning by the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Now here is what exists to test it. A digital video recorder seized from the soulmate under a search warrant confirmed by CBS News. Digital tablets pulled from the same vessel. Cell phone-related equipment. A Starlink satellite system that logged every device connection made to that boat. Witness accounts sourced to Banfield's reporting of flares seen coming from the anchored yacht before 9 p.m. Surveillance footage from lovers' quarters capturing a small dark object near the boats in the relevant time frame. A watch found on a boat that Lynette was photographed wearing on the last day anyone saw her. And through the U.S. Coast Guard's criminal investigation, legal access to records held by Google, Apple, and Starlink's parent company that do not depend on what is or is not still physically on the devices themselves. All of it is being reviewed. Right now. 2 investigations. 2 countries. 1 trail. Through all of it, Lynette's daughter Carly Aylesworth has said the same thing from the very beginning. Not an accusation. Not a verdict. One sentence, stated to CBS News, "My sole concern is to find out what happened to my mother and make sure a full and complete investigation is performed into her disappearance." That is what she has asked for. That is what is happening. And Darlene Hamlet, Lynette's mother, got into a car when she heard the news and drove 6 hours to the Bahamian consulate in Miami to get an emergency passport. A grandmother doing whatever it took to get to the place her daughter vanished. That is who is waiting for answers on the other side of this investigation. Lynette Hooker has not been found. That sentence does not need anything added to it. If this case matters to you, if Lynette's story matters to you, subscribe right now and hit the notification bell. Every development in this investigation gets covered the same way this video was built. Every claim sourced. Every fact verified. No speculation dressed up as reporting. Just the evidence, laid out clearly, so you can follow exactly what is happening as it happens. We are covering every update on this case and you do not want to miss what comes next. Now, one question for the comments. Based on everything you have just heard, the geography, the lanyard, the anchor, the drift, the records, the documents, and the watch found on a boat she was never supposed to have reached. Do you think the soulmate was empty that night? Yes or no? Drop it below.